Back in 2008, I was living in the Czech Republic in Europe. I spent 6 months there. It was just such a great season for me. It was fun. It was challenging. It was an adventure. I lived in a new city, in a new place. I was completely on my own at first. I didn't know anybody when I got there. And then I spent a great time there. And a few weeks in, I met some friends. And they wanted to show me their city. They took me to dinner and some tourist spots. And kind of as the night went on, we went from stop to stop, different places. Stopped at somebody's apartment for a while, going to a pub, the next restaurant, just getting a feel for the city. The night went on from place to place to place, and then we got to the end of the night, and I realized it's pretty late. I better get home. It was past midnight. I was out late. I said bye to my friends, and I said, I'll hop on the bus. I'll see you tomorrow. So I leave, and I go to get on the bus, and I found out that after midnight, the buses don't run. Not on the regular route anyway. So here I am in the middle of this city where I know almost nobody, and I have no idea where I am. I'm somewhere across town, and I'm saying to myself, how did I get here? What led me to this moment? I don't know where I am. The book of Lamentations is asking the same question. How did we end up here? Where are we? That's the question hanging over this book. Last week, Pastor Phil talked about the book of Esther. He gave a bit of the backstory of the people of Israel. Just to give you the brief summary, the short version is, for a long time, Israel lived in ways they weren't meant to. They followed the path of idolatry and selfishness, and they didn't follow the way that God had for them. And prophets came along and said, you're going the wrong way. You don't want to end up where you're going, but they didn't listen. And they kept down this wrong path. Eventually, foreign powers invade their cities, invade their country. They conquer their city and they destroy Jerusalem. They destroy their temple, their place of worship. And their families are torn apart, their cities broken down, and many of their survivors are taken off into exile. And those who are left behind are asking, what happened? How did we end up here? Where is our God? Who are we now? Lamentations is written in the aftermath of that collapse, trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we deal with that? And how do we get out of here? This book gives words, feelings, emotions to trauma and pain and sorrow, and it helps us to engage with things in our lives in the same way. I know that Lamentations might be a strange book for the summertime. I wish we were outside today where it would be sunny and bright. It's still, I think it'll be sunny later, I'm hopeful. But like summertime is like the happy time of year, right? We're going to the lake, we're hanging outside, we're at the pool, life is good. It's when I think the kids are having their most fun, they're running around, they're playing, they're having a good time. Summer is happy time, right? It feels like Lamentations is the book for the middle of cold Michigan winter. Middle of January, things are dreary, or maybe end of fall, leaves are falling, we're saying goodbye to summer, saying, you know what, we can lament now. And so here I am stuck talking about this book in the middle of our gorgeous summer. But I think there's some irony in that, in the sense that I think quite often in life, seasons of lament or seasons of sorrow don't always come or often come when they're supposed to. There's no schedule for lament. There's no timeline. It just kind of shows up. The people of Israel didn't get to decide when they'd be invaded, when they'd be conquered. They just experienced it and had to deal with the aftermath. When life comes, when pain comes, it just does. Lament comes when it comes. It's no respecter of your schedule or your plans. You're just left with the trauma, the hard times of life, and asking, how do we work through this? How do we sit in this? And Lamentations is one of the books that gives us some of those words. It sits in the questions with us. Reminds us that lament isn't outside of our faith. It isn't separate from our faith, but it's central to what it means to be with God, to be with Jesus, and to be fully human. Lamentations is a unique book. It's made up of 5 poems from different perspectives, and they're wrestling through this question as they sit in this pain, sorrow, rubble, saying, how do we do this? What do we do now? And as the writer is looking out over the rubble of the city around him, asking those questions, for us, it's hard to imagine what that would be like, I think. Picture our cities torn down. But we have some idea for it, like it's such a common trope in Hollywood to destroy the White House or destroy the Capitol or destroy one of our cities like Independence Day or White House Down, Olympus Has Fallen, 2012, Civil War, San Andreas. Like there's so many movies about cities in America getting destroyed. You think back to all those films you've seen. And those are more maybe abstract. We can imagine like what it would be like. Imagine today if Washington was set ablaze or our leaders were taken off into exile. Some of you might like that, depending on who's in power, but imagine today that if our government fell apart. Or more personally, imagine you're saying goodbye to your childhood home. Maybe it's up for sale and you're saying goodbye to those lost memories. Or maybe it's the cottage or the camper that maybe there was a fire, it burns down, or it's being sold or rebuilt. Or you say goodbye to your grandma, your grandpa, your mom, or your dad, and you're going to get rid of their stuff. You're having the estate sale. Saying goodbye to these things, these memories that hold meaning to you and value as you send them off with somebody else. The memories and the moments connected to these things as you say goodbye to them, they disappear. That's what the Israelites are dealing with, wrestling through and wondering, like, what do we do now as these things are given away? Now, throughout this book, the language is incredibly raw. It's very honest. It's some of the phrases are hard to read. They're so personal and brutal and raw as they talk about their own pain. In chapter 1, even the 3rd verse, it says this. It says, after years of pain and hard labor, Judah's gone into exile. She camps out among the nations, never feels at home. Hunted by all, she's stuck between a rock and a hard place. The author says, he struck me with lightning, skewered me from head to foot. Then he sets traps all around so I can hardly move. He left me with nothing, left me sick and sick of living. He wove my sins into a rope and harnessed me to captivity's yoke. I am goaded by cruel taskmasters. For all this I weep buckets of tears, and not a soul for miles around cares for my soul. This is someone sitting in the rubble, trying to put words to how it feels to watch your home, your security, the people you love be torn away from you and torn apart. And sometimes when life gets heavy, when life gets hard, lamenting is all we really have. To sit with word, to sit with honesty, and let these words speak for us. Some of the language in this book might feel a little abstract to you or strange to us. It might feel religious at times, or it might feel like you're almost pretending or trying to personalize it, but I think we're actually a lot more comfortable with lament than we might realize. Think back to that first middle school or high school crush, when your heart got broken for the first time. I think back to my 16-year-old self, riding in my car, songs blasting on the radio. I was an emo kid when I was in high school. Any emo kids here today? Think back to those scene times, like post-punk, emo music. It was like cranking on the radio. And as I'm going through a breakup, I'm cranking Dashboard Confessional, and I'm screaming these songs out in my car saying, why did she leave me? What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? Even in my 16-year-old self, I knew a little bit what it meant to lament. I didn't call it that, obviously, but these artists, these songs became words for me as I worked out my own pain. I remember after my first year of Bible college, I was headed home. My dad came and picked me up. And it was just such a powerful year for me. I'd experienced so many new things. God had worked in my life in so many ways. And I realized that I would never experience life like that again. And on the 45-minute drive home, I cried most of the way. And I just kept saying over and over again, Dad, it's never going to be like this again. I'll never experience this the same way. This season is over. And I lamented the end of just a really powerful, great season in my own life. We all have seasons of life that we lament at some point. A season gone by. Maybe we look back at our high school or our college years when we were younger or healthier, more free, less stress, less on our shoulders. Maybe you're lamenting a lost job or lamenting getting fired or lamenting a friend moving away, losing someone that you love. I'm not an emo kid anymore, although at heart I always will be, I'm sure. I still love a good sad song. But songs still speak for me today, speak to me. My biggest lament, personally, came in 2014. In 2014, my dad was diagnosed again with cancer. And over 5 months, we watched the cancer take his life from us as he passed away, and we said goodbye. I remember even then driving in my car listening to sad songs or sitting in the hospital room with my sister playing the radio and singing along, or singing hymns with my family around my dad's bed as we said goodbye. These words became my laments. And at 63, we said goodbye to him. The songs helped me ask, why him? Why us? Why now? What did we do to deserve this? How do we move forward from here? And the book of Lamentations gives us words and feelings and language for moments like that. Actually, our Bible is full of language like that. Lamentations and the Psalms. Words that help us speak because maybe we don't have words for ourselves. The writer, he's so honest. He's brutally honest at times. Lamentations 3 says, he ground my face into the gravel. He pounded me into the mud. I give up on life altogether. I've forgotten what the good life is like. I say to myself, that is it. I am finished. God is a lost cause. I'm not sure if you've prayed a prayer like that. I would imagine that a lot of us have at some point. Lamentations tells us it's okay to feel those things, to wrestle with those moments. The writer doesn't soften his words. It's okay to ask those kind of questions. And even more than that, I think Lamentations is an invitation to us. Why do you think some of the most tortured artists are the best ones? They're in touch with how it feels to lament, to express themselves. Lamentations is more than just empathetic, but it is an invitation to participate, to express yourself, to bring your own laments before God and sit with words like this and be honest to God about where you are, where he's at, and how you move forward. As I read through this book, it's largely sorrowful. It's largely sad. It's a heart cry speaking from brokenness, confusion, isolation. But right in the middle of the book, there's this one small section. There is this tiny glimmer of hope. In 5 chapters, there's like 4 or 6 verses that have a touch of hope. And the author says this, he says, I'll never forget the trouble, the utter lostness, the taste of ashes, the poison I've swallowed. I remember it all. Oh, how well I remember the feeling of hitting the bottom. But there's one thing I remember. And remembering, I keep a grip on hope. God's loyal love couldn't have run out. His merciful love couldn't have dried up. They're created new every morning. How great your faithfulness. I'm sticking with God. I say over and over, almost like convince himself, I'm sticking with God. I'm sticking with God. He's all I've got left. The author wants to remind us that in the middle of all of this, despite being surrounded by pain and sorrow and tragedy, there's still hope that God is faithful, that God's still with them in the middle of his deepest, darkest valley. He says, he's all I've got left. Reminds me of Jesus and the disciples when Jesus says to them, are you going to leave me too? And they're like, bro, Jesus, where else are we going to go? You're all I've got. Now, along with that, I do want to say that if you're in a good season today, if you are in the summer of your life and everything is great, if things are the way they should be for you, I just want to say, take note of that. Hold on to these moments. Make a note for yourself. Remember what God's like right now. Or if you're in a dark season, a hard season, if you're lamenting, but you do get these tiny glimmers of hope, these 3 or 4 verses in the midst of your lament, I'd say hold on to those too. Because there will come a time when you need those moments. The hard seasons will come. You want to look back and hold on to moments like this. A few years ago, I was really great at journaling. I've lost the habit a little bit, not like I once was, but I used to journal quite a bit, write down my own thoughts, prayers, laments. In the middle of a particularly hard season, I had written in my journal some words that still stick with me today. They're in my mind's eye. I wrote down, God, I know for sure that I experienced you today. No matter what I think tomorrow, no matter what I think later, I'm convinced that you're present with me today. I wrote that down because I knew that tomorrow would come. After chapter 3, we'd be back in chapter 4 and chapter 5, and the hard seasons would come again. But I could look back on that moment and rest in it and lean on it as a time I knew for sure that God was real in my life. Back in 2008 in the Czech Republic, as I was trying to find my way home in the middle of the night in a strange city, I began to just walk toward the general direction of my apartment. Didn't know where I was going, but I just began to head that way. And then slowly, after an hour and an hour, I began to see familiar landmarks. A bus stop I knew, a restaurant I'd seen before. And eventually, around 2 a.m, I got home. I was safe and sound. I'm here today, obviously. My story had a good resolution. It had a happy ending for me. But Lamentations, it doesn't end like that. There's no resolution to this book. After chapter 3, about God's faithfulness, chapter 4 happens, chapter 5 happens. This book's unique as the poems are written. Something kind of cool about them is they're actually written in an acrostic style. So this book, each chapter has 22 stanzas. The Hebrew alphabet also has 22 letters. And so each stanza begins with the first letter and next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Almost as if the author is saying, I'm lamenting from A to Z. It's the complete biggest imagination of lament that I can put together. And 1 through 4 all have this same 22 stanza structure. In chapter 5, he loses that acrostic style. It kind of falls apart. As if the author is saying, I can't hold it together anymore. What was ordered has turned into chaos. And the book ends like this. It says this, the last verses say, but you, eternal one, despite all of this, you abide and rule over from generation to generation. Why then have you completely forgotten about us? Why have you turned your back on us through so many dark days? We are so sorry and have suffered for it. Eternal One, take us back again. That way, we may be restored to you and you to us just as it should be. Or are you so angry that you've rejected us? You've given up on us completely. And that's how it ends. That's the end of the book. There's no pretty bow. There's no nice resolution. The people are still hurting and questioning, asking God, have you given up on me? One of my favorite movies of all time is a musical. It's called Once. It's about a woman who cleans houses and a street musician who fall in love. She sees him busking on the streets, and they begin to talk, and they're both musicians, and they begin to sing together and play together, write songs together. You find out, though, that she has a kid and a father of her child that's kind of still in the background somewhere, and he's got this relationship that he hasn't quite let go of, and you're watching them work together. They actually write and record an album together, and their love seems so real and tender and beautiful, and you want so bad for these two to fall in love and get together. And as the story goes on, you realize that life is complicated. This movie captures the reality of life, that sometimes life doesn't go the way you'd planned. And sort of in the ending, but at the end, they don't get together. You're rooting for them the whole time. You're like, why not? Why? You're supposed to be together. It's so obvious. But at the end, she goes back to the father of her child, and he goes off to his ex who he felt connected to. And sometimes in life, people who fall in love don't end up together. Not everything resolves in life, not in the way we'd hope necessarily. Sometimes things don't resolve. Of course, we believe that someday it'll all be set right. That's our hope, right? That someday things will all make sense. Between now and then, we just may not know. I know we like pretty bows in church, things buttoned up nicely. Our songs kind of all end that way. Most of our sermons do, because it's hard when life doesn't have a nice resolution. But Lamentations lets us sit in the middle of grief and questions and just be okay sitting there. Okay without the resolution at times. I've heard it said that life is lived forward and understood backward. I think that's mostly true. But there's always things that I think we'll never understand in this side of things. Things we'll never quite figure out. I'm always going to lament my dad. I don't think I'll ever understand why that happened the way it did when it did. It may never make sense to me. And I'm okay sitting in that. I believe that despite that, there's that glimmer of hope that God is still faithful despite my own questions or despite my own laments. So when things are good, when you're in the good season, take note of those times, those moments, so you can hold on to them when life gets hard and life gets tough. There's no right season for lament. Lament just comes when it comes, and we're left having to deal with it. That's just how life goes. But it's natural. It's part of our faith. It's part of our scriptures to bring our laments out, to bring them to God, to express ourselves through these things. God isn't afraid of your honesty. It also means learning to mourn with those who mourn, to weep with those who weep. Maybe if things are good for you now, if you're in that great season, your invitation is to say, God, open my eyes to those in my life who are mourning, those in my life who are weeping, who need somebody to sit with them, to lament with them so they aren't alone in this process. This book doesn't tell us everything will be okay, but it tells us it's okay to not be okay sometimes, to sit in that and be okay with the lack of resolution at times. Because even in those seasons, we can still hold on to hope. That if things don't fully resolve for us in this life, that God is still faithful, even in the midst of it. Lament is a practice. It's an invitation to be honest with ourselves and with God. Practices help us know ourselves more deeply, more intimately, know God more deeply, more intimately. In a moment, we're going to practice communion together, coming to the table. In Jesus' deepest, darkest times, before he's betrayed, sent to the cross, his practice is to come to the table with his disciples, to share a meal, the bread and the cup. And we're going to sing a song together right now, and then I'll come back up in a second and take it to the table together, okay? Let's sing.